Yes, welcome everyone. We are live at the CDK Day, and I think this is one of the first ever panel discussions here, and I'm happy to be part of this along some very cool members of the AWS community. Our topic today is the local cloud, ideas to ensure developer productivity in serverless architectures. And yeah, let's maybe start with a quick round of introduction and give everybody the chance to know us better, and let's maybe say some words about us. So what's our name, what's our company we're working for, and our role? And yeah, ladies first, let's maybe start with you, Sahima.
Okay, thanks. My name is Saima Javed, and I am working with the organization which mostly provide software services, digital services, and mostly they are providing services for finance and lease. They have started cloud services department a few months ago, and I am preparing for joining them as a software architect. Currently, we are in testing and developing phase. We are doing different applications, working on different projects as a pilot project. There are different parts we are working on. Some is for data analytics, some projects are for modernization, application modernization, and some are for just for DevOps. So this is what my introduction is.
Cool, thanks for being here. And Danielle, over to you.
Thanks, Christian. My name's Danielle Heberling. I'm geographically located in Portland, Oregon in the United States. And I work for a company called Tango. If you want to find the Tango that I work for, you're going to want to go to tango.us in your web browser. And we are a platform that allows you to auto-generate documentation in seconds. Currently, we have a Chrome extension and a desktop application. I'm a little biased because I work there, but I personally use it myself and I really enjoy it. And check it out if you're interested. If not, that's cool too. And my role there is a back-end software engineer. And because we're a small startup, there's only about 5 folks on the back-end team. That also encompasses DevOps. So we are all in on AWS serverless, and we use the CDK to deploy and provision our resources. And so far, I've been really loving the CDK.
Nice. And I really like your Lambda icon over your shelf behind you. That's really cool. Yeah, thank you. Johannes, you're the reason why we're here. So who are you? What are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So I'm Johannes, work for FICO, which is a US-based company. I work out of Germany. I've been with the organization for quite some time. In my current role, I'm working in the developer experience team, and our aim is to help the rest of our organization to get more productive from a development standpoint. For that, I help the teams to build CI/CD pipelines, and I help to empower them to use infrastructure as code like CDK to be successful in delivering to our clients. And yeah, well, you already mentioned, Christian, I'm here because I had this fundamental question for my cloud developers in India, right? And I think we're going to get back to that in a few minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And over to you, Matt. You wear a special shirt today. Maybe tell us also about this.
Yes. So I don't think we've mentioned it yet, but we're all AWS Community Builders here in this panel. So that's a great program that you can apply to if you're not currently a member, although a lot of people are at this point, which is pretty great. Anyway, I'm Matt Morgan. I'm a Senior Director of Software Engineering with PowerSchool. My team, which is works on a product called Naviance, we've been using the CDK and serverless for a little over 2 years now, and we like it quite a lot. We've had a lot of focus on developer experience and enabling the cloud journey and that kind of thing. So I have a wide range of experience here, just in terms of understanding what does it mean to have a local development environment versus developing against cloud, and we've kind of done a little bit of everything.
Cool. So I will end the introduction round and also would like to introduce myself. I'm Christian Bonstelet. I'm based in Germany, in Cologne, and I'm working as an AWS solution architect at a company named DFL Digital Sports. which is a subsidiary of the DFL. This is the company behind the Bundesliga, the German soccer league. So we do a lot of cloud and AWS development, but also a lot of football in my day-to-day job. And what I usually do in my job is to ask questions. And I think this makes me hopefully a good moderator for the session today. Let's see. you can provide some feedback if you liked it or not. But the main part is not about introducing ourselves, of course. But as Johannes, you mentioned, you had this initial question you raised in our Community Builders Slack, and this was actually the trigger to where a group of us found that they wanted to say something about their experience, and we thought, let's make this discussion a bit publicly. So and this is why we're here, and I think it's very, very cool to now get more into detail about the different approaches we identify to ensure developer productivity. Danielle, what would you say? What is your approach working with the cloud or in the cloud, and also to ensure developer productivity in your job?
Yeah, so I fall pretty strictly on the extreme of testing against the cloud all the time. So my internal developer loop looks like I make a code change. It might be code within a Lambda function. It might also be an infrastructure change in CDK. I then deploy that up to my personal AWS account sandbox, and I test it in the cloud. And that includes, looking through the logs to make sure there aren't any errors, things like that. And also just making sure that things work as expected. But everything happens in the cloud. Currently, I'm not doing anything locally on my computer. And with that said, before I go any further, I acknowledge that I live somewhere that has very fast internet connection and is pretty reliable. So I totally understand how, this might not necessarily work for everyone, but I'm fortunate enough where I have the privilege to be able to do this. And then just a little bit more about the AWS environments. They're actually just separate AWS accounts. So for example, how we do it at Tango, where I work, every single backend engineer has their own separate AWS account. And the thought for that is it's much easier to poke around the console if there's fewer things deployed. It's much easier to keep track of things. And also, if I really want to get kind of nuts and experiment with something that might completely break something, I can rest assured that it's only going to happen in my environment. I'm not going to break it for my coworkers. So that is a good way to go about it, just from my perspective and from my coworkers. We all like it. And then beyond that, we also have other shared AWS accounts / environments. So whenever I'm ready to actually make a code change to the code base, I put up a pull request we just use GitHub, but you could do it in any code repository. It gets approved, it gets merged, and we have a CI/CD process, which is pretty much just fancy GitHub actions that does all the building, CDK deploy, and it deploys the code change to an integration. We call it an integration AWS account. And then our front-end engineers use the integration account as their back-end. So the great part about that is it's another way where we can catch bugs. And sometimes the front-end engineers do, and they let us know, and then we can go back and fix up the issue before it even hits our customers, which I really love. But yeah, then beyond that, we just have a staging and a production. So once we want to get up there.
Okay, that's interesting. So your approach is based on multiple pillars, like you work in the cloud completely. You have your sandbox environment, some kind of a isolated ecosystem per team or per developer, and you have a high degree of automation to create a fast feedback loop. I would say this is somehow very much related to the way I think personally, and I would like to work using AWS and using the cloud. But then, and also put this, I still remember, put this in as my opinion in our Slack discussion. And then, Johannes, you raised your voice and brought a completely, you destroyed my argumentation because you brought in a completely new perspective of thinking about this. Could you tell us a bit more about your experience?
Yeah, of course. And I would follow Danielle's argumentation and your argumentation that developing in the cloud is as easy as possible using fast internet connectivity, right? But not everyone has that privilege. And the pandemic has shown me and my global organization that we have a lot of people working, as an example, from India or also from other parts of the world where the latency is higher, where the data centers are not as close as you would expect them to be, where the connectivity breaks. And that has led to a lot of our developers then reducing their productivity just because they were not able to test or to verify what they were actually doing or what they wanted to achieve or what they wanted to develop. And it has been a big challenge for us. And I brought this question into the community builder as well, just to get this discussion started. And I think this is also what we want to try today here. Let's start having a conversation about how do we enable local cloud testing, or do we need it, or don't we need it? What is the best approach for that? And for our teams, and we have not yet found a perfect solution, we have the same kind of staging things that Danielle talked about at the end, right? But it doesn't make teams faster. CDK has helped us here in the way that we are starting to use it for integration testing of infrastructure as code. That was something that at least I was not really able to achieve with CloudFormation before. So CDK enables that part as well. Also having some unit tests around the infrastructure, but that obviously depends on the amount of logic that you have in your infrastructure, right? So I would be in favor of having a completely local stack of deploying and developing something. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But at the moment, I think, we don't have it. So maybe someone listening to us has a great idea or has a great solution for us. Would be cool to get that feedback afterwards. But that's my perspective. Thanks, Christian.
Yeah, cool. Very, very insightful. And I think we made up our mind also to think about how we would like to extend the discussion. We will come to this in the end. It's quite challenging to cover all details of this very important topic in the 30 minutes. So we want to get the most out of it in this 30 minutes. And little experience speaking about bad internet connection. I traveled to the AWS Summit in Berlin a few days before, and I wanted to work during my train journey, and I simply was not able because the internet connection was so bad. So cloud for me was not, the cloud was not there right now. So Saima, how about you? During our preparing conversations, you said you were more on the hybrid way of working using the cloud. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
As I said, we are currently in evaluation, testing, and developing phase. So we mostly do testing based on the application requirement. Because if the application is on cloud and we are doing lift and shift, then definitely we don't need to test it locally. So what we can do is we deploy it and on cloud platform and then test it on the cloud. But there are few applications which we develop. We try to test it locally. Yep, we are doing hybrid approach because we are currently evaluating both approaches. Yes, that's right. I think I haven't mentioned my organization name in my introduction. That's it provides finance and leasing services. I hope if somebody have an experience of financing leasing, they must have heard of them. It's a big organization. I'm working from Pakistan, by the way. So it's a big organization and we have good internet services. So our organization managed to have a good internet services and they mostly prepare the other option. If one provider is down, they have the other option. So we do not have problem for internet connectivity. So for that matter, if we are working with the cloud, it's okay with us. But yes, there are different organizations, smaller organizations, they have a problem for internet connectivity because in Pakistan, we don't have data centers we might have using the nearby data center, but in Pakistan we don't have any. So yes, that's the issue which is by Johannes. Yes, it's been experienced by other organizations, but we are not facing it. But yes, it is in our region. We are facing it. So yes, that's all.
Cool. Yeah. What I learned from you, I think, or we all learned from you, is that experimenting with different kind of approaches is key to decide better what works in which kind of situations. And what comes to my mind now is not only we talked a lot about a stable connectivity or an internet connectivity, but it might also be latencies. So, right, as you said, you don't have a data center right next to your location or maybe a bit far away. So when we speak about fast feedback loops, depending on where you are or how fast your internet connection is, this might actually have an impact on your feedback loops somehow, or fantastic things like timeouts and so on. So very, very annoying things in detail. Yeah, Matt, you are, if I remember correctly, you are on a journey, I would say. What is this journey you're in?
So I mentioned before that we've done all sorts of different things, develop against cloud, develop with local emulators and things like that. And I think that's because the product I work on, Naviance, is an older product. It was born in a data center before the days of cloud, and as such, we just had developer traditions that sort of predated cloud. So there's lots of local development. You run MySQL locally and all that. I think we've seen those kinds of things. So bridging into cloud and starting to make use of more cloud native services. We did look at a lot of things, local stack, SAM, those kinds of things. And I think that I don't fall all the way. I do like developing against cloud. I think it's very important for developers to get into cloud, get into accounts and see the console and experience all of those kinds of things, really understand how things work, be able to go and look at log groups and all of that. I wouldn't really favor a local only experience. But we have definitely seen places where the feedback loop is bad, developing against cloud, where you have that frustrating, I just can't figure out this one little bug or something like that, and it takes 5 minutes every time I make a slight change, and that can be a really frustrating way to work. So additionally, I think when we're writing the compute layer of some application, we're writing a Lambda function or something like that. Often we can, if we conceive of that as a pure function, it becomes very easy to write a unit test and say, here are the inputs, here are the outputs. I mean, this is getting away a little bit from we're just making SDK calls or something like that. If we have actual logic there, I think that thinking of that in terms of a local unit test and having that that as a development loop or TDD really makes a lot of sense. But then once it's in pretty good working order, go to cloud. I love CDK Watch. I think that was a big step forward. There's you see that showing up in other frameworks, SAM Accelerate, and serverless framework has something similar too. So those are great innovations, and I hope that we continue to kind of move in both directions. Like think about how do we make developing against cloud better, and how do we have better emulations for the cases that don't make sense.
Interesting. And would you say on if you look, or if I take a look on the journey you mentioned, what is more challenging? Is it more the tool set and the techniques you use, or is it more working on a shared mindset of thinking about how we want to be productive?
I mean, I guess the thing to me is that it's so contextual. It's hard to even answer that question. I think cloud has been great for us. I think we've made a lot of progress and built a lot of really cool things by focusing on cloud. But the emulation that works, for application A could completely fall apart and become way too complicated for application B. So it is, my thinking about this is that we can't commit too much in one direction or another. We always have to be examining, what's the right level of tooling for the current problem to be solved.
Okay, cool. Speaking about building cool things, I would like to maybe transition to something we thought that we not only want to talk about this, but actually want to show you something and give you something at the takeaway. So we will put this the link to a sample application, Matt, you provided and you developed for demonstration purposes as later on in the show notes or somehow. But maybe let's talk about this. What did you do there? And let's maybe take a closer look on this solution and tackle some details.
Sure, let me walk us through that. All right. So this is a CDK application. It does something very simple. It takes an input of an age and a country and lets us know whether or not that individual would be legal to drive in that country. So to start off, this is my CDK stack. It's just a standard CDK application. I didn't do anything special to it. This is the good thing about this is that I didn't have to change this in any way in order to get to work in a local environment. So you can see I have a stack here. There's a table construct. There's a Node.js construct, and then there's a state machine construct with some steps that feed into it. So again, just a standard CDK application. And so let me jump here into the Lambda function that I wrote. This Lambda function queries a DynamoDB table and then returns a number. This function has one minor alteration that it had to be done in order to make this work in the local environment. It has to find where is DynamoDB running locally. And to do that, it evaluates the AWS SAM local environment variable to learn that it's running in the SAM environment. And then it will use this Docker network in order to connect to that database. All right. So this is still pretty straightforward. This runs fine in production. Now, in order to orchestrate all of this, I had to write a fairly long bash script. One thing to call out here is that actually the bash script is more lines of code than the combined CDK stack and Lambda function, which is a little bit of a red flag for me personally. When the tooling ends up being more lines of code than the actual application. A couple other things to call out here. One is that while we can generate Amazon States Language or ASL from CDK constructs, we cannot reverse engineer that automatically. CDK will not output the generated ASL. And so in order to do that, I had to turn to a third-party library from Nathan Ajay called CDK ASL Extractor. And that will then produce something that looks like this. And this is something that then I can feed into step functions local. So I'm combining that tool, the outputted synth CDK stack, step functions local, DynamoDB local, and SAM. In order to do that, I'm using AWS CLI extensively, which is how those tools work. That's fine. It's all well and good to be using AWS CLI and knowing that. But again, it feels a little incongruous that in my actual deployment, I'm using infrastructure as code. I'm using CDK. And then for my local environment only, I'm using AWS CLI. I have to add that endpoint URL. And another thing to call out here is that I have to run these services on Docker, and I have to create a Docker network in order to get them to be able to communicate with each other. That's another thing that is not a concern on the cloud side of this. When I'm deploying into accounts, I don't have to think about Docker networks. I don't have to understand them. But in order to operate this, I do have to do that. So there's a lot going on here. It is fairly complex, and I feel like there's some additional work in order to make the tooling story really be what we want it to be. However, I will demonstrate it really quickly. So I can execute this, find out if 16-year-olds are allowed to drive in the USA. So it's going to create all the containers. It's going to use AWS CLI in order to create the resources in the containers. It's going to invoke SAM as part of the state machine execution. And then finally, I get this output of can drive is true. So 16-year-olds can drive in the USA. One more quick test. See whether or not 5-year-olds can drive in Germany. It's doing the same thing again. This all can operate offline, doesn't require an internet connection. Of course, I have to have an internet connection to talk to you right now.
Please don't
it takes
cut it
about
off
12
right
seconds.
now.
Sorry?
Please don't cut it off right now to demonstrate.
Yeah. So anyway, the output there was that 5-year-olds cannot drive in Germany, so I guess they'll have to take the train.
Nice. Really cool. So this is something we want to provide you as a takeaway. So we published it on GitHub, right? And everyone can check this out, take a look, play around with the tools, and have a closer look on this. We're coming to our end a bit of the discussion, and I would like to maybe go over to the wrap up. What I learned today, and hopefully you also, is that it's somehow important to, as always, work backwards from your customers. So we learned about several approaches, and the whole discussion about working locally or working in the cloud for me is almost as old as the Holy Bible. So it's a very, very old story that is constantly told everywhere. But it's good that it is discussed and that we share our experience. But I think it's also you demonstrated by talking about your approaches that for me, complexity is everywhere. So independent, if you work completely on the cloud, you have the complexity or the challenges to think about resource names. So you can't just have a static S3 bucket name, because the next one that deploys this in the same account will get a surprise message from CloudFormation or anywhere else. And on the other side, if you work on the local side, you have the complexity to dive deeper into tool sets and toolings like Docker or shell scripts. So I'm more than 10 years in this business, and I still have to Google how to write a good shell script or how to write an if condition. So I will never get comfortable with this. And that's, I think, I see a lot of nodding faces. This is something we can keep as a takeaway. Look a bit at the time. We wanted also to think about to extend the discussion a bit. So we propose to discuss afterwards in the CDK workspace. I think this is somehow promoted also during the CDK Day. There is a channel that is called CDKDay2022, where we would like to get your feedback about our discussion, feedback about your experience on especially, get into the discussion and learn from each other. This is, I think, very important in this area. Or if you would like, simply create a discussion or an issue on the GitHub sample we provide, and then get in touch with us. I think we have a few minutes, so we are very efficient today in our discussion. So maybe let's spend the next 5 or 6 minutes in an open discussion about what would you wish for the future, for something that would make your life a bit easier. Is there something that you'd say, oh, a CDK library or a CDK feature or a tooling feature that will help you on your journey? Johannes.
I can go first and kind of add my thoughts, right? Which really is, if CDK, and I know that it's not there today, would extend the capabilities that we have for unit testing, integration testing today to replicate at least a few of the services locally for you, kind of in a sense, right? That would be really helpful. And I think Matt and Daniel, we had that discussion as a preparation for this, right? Where we said, any solution that we know for local cloud testing today is limited to a specific amount of serverless, let's call it services that you can actually use, right? So I cannot just bring up a serverless MSK cluster to test that one locally, right? I need to do some Docker Kubernetes stuff to get that on my local. And that's something, if we manage to get tooling that makes this kind of things easier, or at least to mock it for you, right? So you can interact with it in your Lambda functions, that would make serverless development at least a little bit more offline, and would make long flights to US from Germany also more productive than they are today. And that's kind of my wish list, right? It's really important to get developers productive with anything that they do. And that would be my wish part. So I don't know who else wants to go.
I can chime in. Oh, sorry, Matt. I'll just go real quick so you can go. I feel like for me, sometimes my issue is with like IAM specific, if we're talking AWS with permissions, because like sometimes you can like locally test like in SAM local and it works great. And then you deploy it and then you find out that like your Lambda, the role that it was assuming locally on your computer is different than the one that's up in the cloud. So I think I would like something to more surefire, you know, if I'm emulating something locally to make sure that I have the right permissions.
Yeah, I remember, and I hope I remember that it was a discussion with Ben Kehoe, who also raised this topic on IAM. And for me, the essence of this discussion was also that CDK can be, it can be a risk if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So if you simply use things and under the hood, there are a lot of IAM roles or policies created, and you don't know what's happening. You can be surprised about if you don't know the mechanisms behind this. I think very, very important topic if you talk about security and things like this. Yeah. But Matt, over to you. You also wanted to wish something today.
I think it's, you know, the story, you know, especially in the application that I put together to demonstrate this is that there's not really a cohesion there. That's left up to me. In order to string these things together, step functions local is pretty good. You can get it as a Docker image or as a jar file. DynamoDB local, same thing. Like these are fully compliant with the real services and you can do everything that you need to. But how often are we just using one of those, right? Almost never. You're almost never just saying, I only care about, you know, DynamoDB or something like that. I mean, occasionally, but it's pretty rare. So how do we put these things together? AWS docs are pretty lean on this, and you're mostly dependent on third-party tooling.
Yeah, and Saima, I would like to ask you maybe also as the closing question, as you use the hybrid approach. Do you see that the way you work with the cloud or locally has an impact on your architecture decisions or the way how you construct your applications? Does it somehow influence the way?
Yes, obviously, when we are approaching towards a hybrid approach, when we are using hybrid approach, obviously, if we are selecting cloud architecture, then definitely our application should be all on the cloud. And if we are using some other architecture, definitely there is an impact on it. About the wish list, I want to add something for CDK because there is I would like to add a feature. I would like to see a feature for load testing because on the cloud, or if we have web applications, it is easier to use load testing because we already have tools like JMeter, and there is another tool like Artly that is available to test applications on the cloud. But for the applications where we're using different services and especially step functions, and like the region we don't have data centers, as I already mentioned. So if we are doing development locally and using step functions, for example, a use case like if we are developing an algorithm for comparing two images and there is a huge volume to test. So I think it's necessary to test it locally. The load has done it locally before going online, because there might be algo fails for some images because images are older or they are not fine for the algorithm, or there are some challenges. The other problem we can see is there is a memory leakage. Maybe we are short of memory, or maybe networking issue. So I think it will be good if we have a load testing opportunity on the local machine when we are working on local environment. So I guess it will be a good opportunity to give good quality code.
Perfect. Okay, we are at the end of our discussions, and I want to take the chance to thank you very much for all who is listening, for all who participating on this very interesting discussion. Let's use the channels to enhance the discussion afterwards, and I'm really looking forward to a fantastic CDK day and a nice day, evening, morning, wherever you are, and have a nice rest of the week, of course. Thank you all. Bye-bye.